Namaskar, welcome to PGurus. I'm your host JK, and today we're going to discuss about not much serious stuff, more of a very light-hearted discussion with our very own author of Twisted Thread, Mr. Kansara. Namaskar.
Namaskar. Glad to be a part of the PGuru conversation and really looking forward to a great time.
Thank you very much for accepting our invite, Kans. I would call you Kans.
Yes, absolutely.
Don't feel offended about that, okay? Kans, just let us know about your book first, right?
Sure.
How did that happen?
So my book is called Twisted Threads, and it came about, I would say, through my connection with Twitter. Like many of us, I started using Twitter just before the 2014 elections. That's when the social media was just getting heated up. I would say a lot of people were discovering what is this all about. Twitter seemed to be the fad. People like Shashi Tharoor were there. They were trying to make use of the new trend on the internet, and as the election season was heating up, one of the things that happened is I started reading about what's happening, what are all these candidates, and like many of us before 2014, 2013, I was a very apolitical guy. I couldn't care less what is happening in the country as long as I get my monthly paycheck from the company that I work for. But something's changed. I think one part that changed, a lot of us, I would say, not just me, is there was this author called Media Crooks,
Right.
who used to write.
Political crook, is it?
Now I think he's become Politic Crooks because
something.
I guess Twitter suspended his account and multiple times.
Right.
So he's come in many avatars since then. In those days, he used to write blogs which were kind of viral.
Right.
And that's how I started coming back to Twitter. In fact, I had created my account in 2010, but I never tweeted anything. So
Long sabbatical.
long sabbatical. So that got me into at least national politics, I would say. I started understanding a little more about the ecosystem, the leftist ecosystem, basically. I think the other ecosystem is still struggling even after so many years.
I guess we're still amateur in that.
Yes, a lot to learn, which we are reluctant to do also. But I knew a lot about, I learned a lot about, what was happening around that time. And, there were a couple of satire websites which were very popular in those days. There was obviously the Unreal Times, and then there was Faking News.
Right.
It was almost as if there was this healthy competition between them on who is going to roast the politicians the most. And so I found that I liked doing that.
Right.
Satire.
So you had the flair for it.
I found it out. That
Discovered it.
I discovered myself, I would say.
Right.
Kind of like the introspection, not the kind that Rahul goes to introspect in Thailand and other areas, but
Right.
it was more that I wrote some limericks, I wrote some threads. I used to write these fictitious stories, but based on real lives, as threads. I still remember, I think one of the first threads that I had written was after the elections, when someone said Rahul is more Hindu than Modi, and the reason for that was given as he reads Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads, and that kind of got me going. So
all this idea you got about turning a potato into gold, you think might have come from there, is it?
It might have come from there, yes, absolutely. So that was one of the first threads, where I talk about how do Rahul Gandhi's advisors advise him about reading Gita and Upanishads, and that became fairly popular in those days. So then I started writing these threads, and then I was encouraged by a few people saying, hey, why don't you publish a book? You have good material. So that's why the book is called Twisted Threads. So the Threads is a tribute to Twitter, because that's what got me going.
Why is it twisted? Thread I can understand. Twitter, I guess you have a lot of threads.
So if you've read the book, right? So if you do that, you will see that there are a lot of threads actually. Even though the events are based on the 2014 elections and up to 2017 Gujarat elections. But what I have tried to do as a part of that, I figured out that there are so many things that we need to talk about. In those days, the attack on church was a narrative. RTE was a narrative. It has disappeared from the discussion nowadays, but people were so much against RTE, people who were supporting BJP at that time. People were still very, Congress's rule was still very close by, right? The people had not forgotten that.
Right.
So there were all of these things, which became a part of the story. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this is a massively connected ecosystem.
Correct.
Both from the point of view of satire and from the point of view of being sinister in some ways. And when I tried to connect all of these, I figured that, okay, it's twisted. So that's where the twisted threads came from.
Between sinister and satire.
I always say that if something can be explained by malice, don't bring stupidity into it. People usually say the other way around. They say that what can be explained by stupidity should not be explained by malice. But the way I see things is completely ulta.
Lovely. Okay. So just deeping dive into our conversation. So there was this new, a recent kind of judgment, if I have to call that, where we have come across a fairly unheard phrase, right? Every saint has a past and every sinner has a future. What's your opinion on that?
If I have to be frank, I would say that with the little that I know about Supreme Court judgments, this is perhaps the most pathetic judgment that I have ever come across. And there has been a lot of outrage, obviously, on social media. And the more I look at it, the more I read about it, the more pathetic it becomes.
Right.
We could start just from the judgment itself, which, as you probably know the background, is that a rapist was more or less pardoned off. I mean, his sentence was curtailed, and he had raped a 4-year-old kid.
And the child died as well.
And the child died after that. And it was, when the judgment was given, it was considered as the rarest of the rare cases, and that was the reason why the punishment was given to the rapist. And so it was, therefore, it is not a humanitarian judgment by any means. It is not going to bring any solace or comfort to the family of the girl. And so that was the first aspect of it, right? So that is you could say that is the knee-jerk reaction that we would all have on listening to the judgment.
Right.
But then you start looking at it. One of them was the statement, the quote rather that you talked about, that every saint has a past and every sinner has a future, and that's the kind of ridiculous statement that you don't expect the highest court of the land to give. The court itself has no basis for anything that is happening in India. It's coming from Oscar Wilde, as you had said.
Right.
And what is the context for that? What does it mean by saying every sinner has a future? You pardon of everybody who has done anything. That is not what the court is for. So that is one aspect of it, right? And then there is the digging deeper part, where the Supreme Court advocate, Nitin Meshram, he had basically tweeted something to the effect of saying, live your life, Feroz, and that kind of got people into an outrage, saying, hey, how can you do that? Do you have a girl, child, all those kind of things. But what was worse was his response to the outrage was a quote from Dr. Ambedkar. And I would just like to read that quote and what Nitin Meshram himself has tweeted. He said that 𝙒𝙬𝙀𝙾𝙦 is quoted 𝙒𝙬𝙀's tweet. So he said, 𝙒𝙬𝙀, this is my reply to your tweet on me. Hindus must realize that they are the sick men of India and that their sickness is causing danger to the health and happiness of other Indians. This is from Dr. Ambedkar in his book Annihilation of Caste. So, I know we are having this kind of a conversation, but to the audience, I would like you to just pause and just think about this quote. Okay, what does that mean in the context of the Supreme Court judgment? Is Nitin Meshram saying that Feroz deserves to walk away because the victim was a Hindu? That's the meaning that I get from it. That's the meaning that a lot of people got from it. Even though Nitin Meshram can still claim that his tweet was only against people like 𝙒𝙬𝙀𝙀 and others who are opposing the judgment.
Maybe if we can just pause here. I remember, I guess there was a lot of outrage across the world when the Nirbhaya happened. Right? After that, I guess we had a sense that nothing of this type is going to happen ever. And then, I guess we have a barrage of events happening here and there, now and then. It's not stopping anywhere. But still, this kind of quote and this kind of arguments just makes one believe that we as a society failed the child.
I would tend to agree with that. Although I would still say that, I think we do end up taking a lot of burden on ourselves.
Right.
Law and order is a burden on the state. But yes, of course, we as a society would need to be a part of it. One of the common complaints against the so-called non-left has always been that we are very good on social media, but we don't mobilize ourselves on the ground. I think these are the kind of judgments and events that are happening in the country which require a voice that should reach the people who have done this, who have done a judgment like this. Because one of the judges is poised to be the Chief Justice of India. So then the obvious question comes as to, is there a way that they are going to even look at what kind of outrage is there on the ground because of the kind of judgments that they are giving?
Right.
So coming back to the question that you asked, yes, I think there is a lot of opposition to a judgment like this. Surprisingly, some of this opposition is very united, which means it is cutting across the wings, the left wing and the right wing and whatever we choose to call it. In a way, it is good. I think we need to see how this voice could reach the people who are sitting at the top and issuing these judgments.
One more judgment that kind of made us flabbergasted, if I have to say, is the hate speech that was given by AIMIM leader 𝙒𝙧𝙤𝙪𝙥𝙥, and he was allowed to go scot-free as well, and saying there's nothing much corroborative against him that could actually give him some judgment against him rather. What do you think about that?
So I had read some of the background of that. In fact, his speech on give us 15 minutes and let us show you what we could do was viral. I think during one of the earlier elections. I don't know how old the clip is, but it was either in 2014 or 2019, and it was just all around Twitter and WhatsApp and Facebook. And ironically, I think one of the points made was that the cops were not able to corroborate the statement and say whether it was true or not, which is really difficult to believe. So that is one aspect of it. Kind of like what happened with Tarun Tejpal case, where despite all the evidence, they said, but this has not been submitted by the council, and that's how things work.
I remember even the 2G case had a similar fate.
Yeah. So
right. Almost all the cases that high profile tend to go this way. Why is that?
Well, I guess at some point there are always power structures that are there, and power structure is the ecosystem, right? So I am not saying that there are institutions like courts, for example, who are influenced by that kind of a power structure. But sometimes you also live by certain ideology, right? Let's say, for example, people talk about constitutional morality.
Right.
People talk about constitutional morality as the basis of our modern India. Where is constitutional morality actually enshrined within the constitution?
Valid point.
Yeah, so it's,
who knows that actually? Who's going to teach us?
Yeah, so it's kind of like the basic structure judgment that came out, I think, during the 𝗤𝙯𝑎𝑛anda Bharati case. But if you ask people, okay, what is the basic structure? It is the basic structure.
That's it.
It's like the idea of India. What is the idea of India?
It is idea of
That is
India.
constitutional morality. So,
It just goes
so
along.
what I am trying to say is that it need not be just the power structure, but the ecosystem drives certain ideologies. The ecosystem drives certain ways of thinking in people. And people may not realize that, what they are doing goes against morality that precedes constitutional morality and which actually exists,
Right.
unlike constitutional morality.
Right.
So that could be one of the reasons why, you have on power structures on one hand and ideology on the other, and they come together and just wreak havoc.
Just a potpourri of something.
Yeah, twisted.
Twisted it is. Twisted thread. Thank you very much, Bhavesh, for all your time. I guess we might have to catch up sometime
Definitely.
again, okay?
Absolutely. Would
Thank you
love
for
to.
watching PGurus. If you like this video, please like and share as well as subscribe to our channel. Thank you.
Namaste.